Well, good evening, everyone. It is 6 o'clock, and can I firstly welcome you all to this meeting of Governance and Audit Committee. As per usual, this is a hybrid meeting with people in the chamber and people normally at home. Can I firstly just say this is going to be live streamed, this meeting, so just be aware of that. If you do need to speak, can you just raise your hand appropriately, and then I will ask you to speak in the order that the hands are raised. If you've got a mobile phone, can you please turn it off and put it on to silent, and I think that's it. We'll leave it there. So we'll start at the agenda. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
I've not had any apologies come through so far, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Item 2. Oh,
sorry, Chair.
Councillor Prothero.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to give apologies for Councillor Gareth Ball. Sadly can't join us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Prothero. Item 2 on the agenda then are the minutes of the meeting of the 21st of July 2025. This is for correctness only. Someone prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Goodjohn. Thank you. Anyone object? No, thank you very much. Item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest and the nature of the interest. Does anyone have a declaration of interest? Nope. Thank you very much. Item 4 on the agenda is the final draft for Little Morgan Council Annual Self-Assessment 24-25. Tom.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thanks for taking this reference this evening. As you say, Chair, it's the updated final draft of the Council's annual self-assessment, and this follows bringing the report to yourselves at Governance and Audit Committee and the Joint Performance Committee before the summer recess. Just by way of very quick background, this is the final annual self-assessment report relating to the previous corporate plan. It's a requirement that was introduced as part of the Local Government Elections Act in 2021, which means that we need to keep our performance under review, consult on, and then publish a report setting out the conclusions of that process once in respect of every financial year. And this report looks through 3 lenses, which are the performance requirements in terms of how well are we performing against our corporate plan, how are we using our resources, and how effective is the Council's governance. To sense check the Council self-assessment judgments and the findings between July and the end of August, we've consulted with staff, trade unions, the Equalities Consultative Forum, elected members and the public. And the draft report has been updated with the findings as a result of that, which is in Appendix A. And for members' convenience, we've highlighted in red text the additions and amendments that have been made as a result of those processes. Members will remember that just before the end of the summer recess, we held a joint scrutiny committee for performance for the first time. 5 recommendations were made as a result of that meeting, and in Appendix B, you've got a breakdown of the consultation responses and also the actions that have been undertaken to address those things as a result. Your committee chair made a total of 4 recommendations, and again within Appendix B you can see the responses that have been made. And just to quickly remind elected members of the recommendations made during that part of the process, the Performance Joint Committee requested that additional information around the self-assessment process should be undertaken and should be placed within the report. We're grateful for all of the feedback from the committees, and additional information has been included within that report, which shows how those overall judgments have been made. There was a recommendation that consideration be given to introducing capped maximum price tenders to control expenditure, and where it's appropriate to do so, maximum price tenders will be considered where there is the potential. There was a recommendation relating to a suggestion to review the methodology to consider if it articulates how well actions have been undertaken during the year. And this particularly related to a discussion by members in terms of actions that were not complete, but within the usual threshold to achieve an amber status, which would happen during the year. We've listened to that feedback, and for future self-assessment reports, we will adopt the same process whereby if something is within 10% of being completed, it will be attributed an amber status. And for members' information, we've included some details in terms of what that means retrospectively for the end of year performance as well. There was a recommendation relating to the council reviewing the contact centre information being presented on the website. We've double checked that that's accessible. And then finally, the Joint Scrutiny Committee considered that the annual scrutiny report should be considered in terms of whether that could form part of the annual self-assessment report. Members will know that for the forthcoming council meeting, that report will come separately, but over the next year, we're going to be giving some consideration to how that could be embedded as well. And then in terms of the recommendations that your committee made, Chair, there was a recommendation relating to the presentation of calculations in terms of percentages of actions and measures that are completed or nearly completed, so mirroring the conversation that was held at the Performance Committee. And again, we've updated that. There was a suggestion that trends relating to the direction of travel of different judgments over the time should be considered. And again, that was a really useful recommendation, and we've ensured that that's been incorporated. The committee also suggested that partners should be engaged in the self-assessment process, and we've made sure that we've strengthened the area of focus for the coming year in terms of looking at how we go about doing that and building that in earlier on in the process in the future as well. And then finally, Chair, there was a recommendation that an easy read or a young person's version should be devised after the consultation, and I'm pleased to let members know that work is advancing to complete that, and that will be published as soon as the self-assessment is approved by Council, following consideration by your committee and, if required, by Cabinet again. Just a couple of other updates to flag since your committee saw the report, Chair. No changes to the overall judgments against those three performance requirements have been made, but a series of strengthening commentary has been added as members requested. Wanted to flag as well that following the conclusion of the end of year performance process, we've amended the performance judgment for corporate resources from good to fair. You'll see within the report that the final end of year information coming in meant that this directorate dipped just below the 85% threshold. So the Cabinet considered the updated draft at their recent meeting. They're bringing it to yourselves again this evening, Chair, for any final comments. If your committee has comments to make this evening, they'll go back to Cabinet in early October and then on to Council in December. And if there are no further comments this evening, the report will go on to Council on the 29th of September for all members to consider one final time. Just in summary, thank you to members for engaging so proactively throughout the process, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Tom. Very comprehensive. It was great to see in the appendices, as you quite rightly say, all the consultation responses from everyone who actually engaged in the process. So thank you for preparing that. Open for questions. Any questions? Hopefully there aren't any, because we should have made them when the draft came before us. But if there are no questions, any comments? Councillor Hooper?
Just really briefly, Chair and Tom, just to, I think we mentioned this at the last meeting, that we've all, I think this committee felt that the process has improved over the last 3 years. And I think that it's really good to see that the comments that were put in by ourselves and other committees have been reflected in you, and I think we've got a good end product. I'm particularly pleased to hear that there will be an easy read version at the end of it, which will make this sort of review accessible to everybody across the Vale. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I think that the response to the consultation is overall been very good. It's great to see some proper engagement with our town and community councils along with our partners. And I think if there was one criticism I had to make, it was that we didn't engage them sooner, and it's good to see that addressed. But overall, I think there is significant feeling within the town and community councils, myself being one for Barry Town Council, that as a dual-hatted member, that there is not enough consultation with town and community councils, and that overall they feel neglected by the Vale Council. And it's good to see that reflected in the document originally, but perhaps even more strengthening of the document regarding how we're going to support them in the near future with the new charter, for example, would be helpful. I think that the amendments made were good, but I would push that we're probably not good enough. We could do with some more work on specifically how we're going to change the way that we are perceived by town and community councils as a Vale Council. Secondly, if I had to make one last criticism, and I do apologise for this, but within the Joint Scrutiny Committee, there was significant evidence brought by councillors regarding the lack of communications by the council. And even though there have been great strides made in 23-24, and that should be acknowledged, I think that moving us up to good across the board already, I think, is a step too far. And especially recently, there is evidence to show that we haven't quite made that step. So I would ask for a recommendation that, as our final recommendation on the final document, that we do not increase our performance from fair to good in engagement and insight, because even though there have been great strides, the Let's Talk survey has gone extremely well, we are doing better on communications. This is not a evaluation of from where we were. This is not an evaluation based on us compared to other councils. This is an evaluation of how we're performing our resources as a self-assessment on where we want to be and where we should be as a council delivering for our residents. Therefore, I don't think that we can in all consciousness say that we are yet at a good rating, to be honest. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Goodjohn. Did you get that, Tom?
I did. Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Hooper, for the feedback, and thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, for the points that you've raised as well. In terms of the town and community councils, feedback, absolutely. I know that through the placemaking process that those relationships are establishing in a different way than they have been before, and there's a challenge now for us to make sure that that reaches across all of the town and community councils. There is something, as you say, about making sure that we engage as early as possible in those relationships as well. I think there's also potential for us to look at how we communicate the self-assessment to the town and community councils. Some of the feedback that we received from the councils, I think, shows that this is maybe a relatively new process to them. So it's really good that they've engaged, and I want to help them to be able to engage even more effectively. Absolutely hear the comments regarding the performance judgment, that one judgment around communications and engagement, and indeed, as you reflect, there was lots of discussion at the joint committee in relation to that, and the forthcoming task and finish group that will be looking as part of the resources scrutiny committee, I think, is going to be really important. The rationale for us increasing that is because of that increased amount of focus that as an organisation we've been given, or giving rather, to that particular part of our work over the last 12 months. And I think the report, as we discussed earlier on in the summer, shows that there is a willingness and an acceptance that we need to do those things better. But in the year that we felt that those strides had been made. So obviously it's entirely down to committee whether you want to make that recommendation back to Cabinet for them to consider again, or whether that's something that you're assured we're taking seriously enough in terms of those areas for future focus that I think are set out in quite a lot of detail within the report, and members will be seeing the results of that activity through the next performance report coming to that scrutiny committee later on in the autumn.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor John.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Just wanted to acknowledge your comments and say I will put that recommendation to the committee if they want to take it. But it's based on the fact that even though we do want to put that more resource into it, we are committed to it. We haven't quite done that yet, and it would be unfair to say we've made the change. It's going up to good on the basis that we want to make the change, not on the basis that we have already made the change. I think it's as simple as that.
Okay, before I ask Councillor John to make the recommendation as proposer, are there any other comments? Councillor Prothero?
Thank you, Chair. I understand what Councillor Goodjohn's saying on the engagement and the communication with town and community councils. I've got 4 community councils in my ward, and that's quite a lot of meetings to go to. But I would concur that they all have that same feeling about the way that they interact with us. And as Councillor Goodjohn has said, it's something that we are listening to them, but we haven't actually got there yet, because their concerns and their criticisms have been, certainly to me, talked about fairly recently as well. And staying with that subject of community engagement, again, because I think we've marked ourselves as good and green on the things we intend to do to support communities with community asset transfers. Having witnessed with one of my community councils an asset transfer that's been going on for a couple of years, that again, I can say we may have ambition to support them, but we're not there yet. And I know we've been talking about it for a little while. So I think it's quite fair what Councillor Goodjohn is saying. And as this is an assessment that we're doing on ourselves, and that we are a listening organisation and we want to improve, I think we should reflect on that before we say that we're good. The other comment that I wanted to make, and I'm sure you know it's coming, is the recommendation that was put forward to help us manage our finances better of capped procurements. And I read disappointingly, I'll be honest, that that's not something that you want to take forward. And I suppose my concern is that we're not really in a position at the moment to have control of our finances. We overspend regularly. We're no different to anyone else. But if we could mandate this, if we could try it, we would save an awful lot of money. And I've said it for quite some time now. So the comment was really from me, we've decided that we don't want to recommend it in all cases. And I'm just wondering why we wouldn't give it a go. So thank you. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Prothero. My own view is on that issue, and again, Vicky may need to give some advice at some stage in a different place, is that council needs to be very careful about fettering its discretion in regards to doing a blanket resolution or approval. My understanding in law, you can't do that. Actually, you're likely to get challenged in regards to fettering your discretion. You've always got to have the option to do something else, but I'm sure it can be picked up next time moving forward in regards to tendering processes. I'm not the expert, and there are other people better than me in this room who are, but I think you just need to be very careful about getting into a position whereby you may be judicially reviewed by a company or wherever to say, you're trying to push the prices down, even though it could be better value for money or whatever else. So I hear what you say. Okay, in regards to the recommendations, Councillor Goodjohn, have you got a recommendation? Number 2, I'm going to say, is firstly, I think we just note the contents of the report, and the second recommendation will be.
Thank you, Chair. That the engagement and insight assessment of ourselves in the self-assessment go from good to fair as it was last year.
Do I have a seconder?
Councillor Prothero, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Prothero.
Yeah.
It's not on my screen. Councillor Prothero.
I'm just being your second chair, that's all.
Oh, thank you. That's that's okay. Thank you very much. So that's proposed and seconded. Can we put then the recommendations to the vote that we note and the recommendation that Councillor John's just raised? All in favour, please show. Anyone against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Treasury Management Monitoring Report 25-26. Gemma?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the Q1 Treasury Management Monitoring Report, which is brought in accordance with the requirements of the SITFA Code of Practice. So this report does amend the PIs in the report for the changes in the capital programme since we brought the strategy back as part of budget setting. All those changes do fall within the limits set out in the Treasury Management and Investment Strategy. The prudential indicators and treasury indicators do obviously include the requirements of the IFRS 16 leasing standard now. So as part of our first year of implementation, there have been some issues identified as part of the audit. So it will be possible that those, the figures that you see before you will change as part of future monitoring reports, but the figures are broadly indicative of the scale of the liabilities in 25-26. With borrowing rates still being relatively high, albeit a reduction in borrowing rates has been pushed back, the Council is attempting to keep its borrowing low and relatively short wherever possible, but obviously trying to balance that against the risk of needing to access high-cost last-minute cash. And in terms of its borrowing activity in the first quarter, the Council's borrowed £6 million, and that's been acquired at an average rate of 4.56%, and it's repaid £4.169 million at 4.84%. So including the leasing liability, external borrowing as at 30th of June was up to 174.683 million. And all of that borrowing falls within the authorised limit and operational boundaries set out within the report. In terms of investments, it's been a far better cash position in the first quarter, and some of that could be because we had a significant level of debtors at year end, and a lot of that was related to Welsh Government grant that was outstanding. So the Council's investment portfolio has increased from 17 million to just short of 55 million as at the 30th of June. And the majority of that's been placed in money market funds and the debt management office. And the average rate return across that is 4.3%. Those are the main points I was going to draw out on the report, but happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Gemma, again for a very detailed and comprehensive report for Q1. Are there any questions? Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a process question, Gemma. I don't know whether you can answer it. I'm just wondering why the Cabinet paper noticed that the use of urgent procedures was used for this, because I thought this would come to us regularly. I don't really understand why that's in the recommendation. Maybe I've missed a trick. Thank you.
Yes, please, if that's okay.
I want someone to answer. I was of the same mind. Why do we have an urgency provision? But if you could deal with that, that'd be great.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was purely down to the date of publication for meetings, because there was a crossover between the publication date for the one and the committee resolution to the other. It was just to make sure that it could come to this meeting. No other reason.
Can you just explain what that means?
Because of the timings of the meetings and when the publication needed to be for the one and the resolution from Cabinet for the other, there was a crossover. So the report was technically available for call-in as a result of the Cabinet resolution. So in order for it to come here without a call-in, and it was coming to committee anyway, but it was just because it was the crossover of those particular dates.
So it's because of the call-in provisions. That's the issue. So you would normally send the report out after, presumably, either it's been called in or no one calls it in. Right, thank you very much for that. Any other questions? Oh, Matthew?
Very quickly, table 11, the capital financing requirement and the gap between that and gross debt, it's obviously diminishing over the next few years quite significantly. Is that comfortable, uncomfortable? Are there any levers you can use to change it? I guess it's, should I be worried or not? It's a question.
I think from a planning perspective, whereas typically historically we haven't borrowed for all our kind of emerging debt, I think we're just planning for that depleted reserves position that we're forecasting elsewhere. So we're assuming that all of the borrowing that we have in our strategy that we're going to borrow externally. The reality is there'll be some slippage in terms of delivery of the capital programme, and there'll be some kind of timing differentials in terms of when we borrow. A lot of that borrowing and over the 30-year period relates to the housing revenue account. So it'll be interesting to see what the kind of offer is in respect of, because at the moment we have a preferential rate around borrowing, and that informs a little bit of our kind of timing of when we take borrowing. It'll be interesting to see. That's due to come to an end mid-year next year. I'd be interested to see whether that's being replaced by anything as well. I'm not uncomfortable about it, but we do need to keep it under review. There obviously is quite a significant interest rate risk, and we want to make sure that that debt's laddered, so our kind of repayment profile is achievable as well. Okay.
Thank you, Gemma. Councillor John.
If I can just state one statement and then make a question, just to say that when we're borrowing on the HRA, that's mostly in order to build housing, in which we're expecting to have an income coming from that, which is better than most of the kinds of borrowing that a council would do. Secondly, just want to ask, if we're assuming no internal borrowing in the future, if we're assuming that for financial planning reasons, is that also being incorporated with the financial strategy going forward?
In terms of the benefits that we currently receive from that internal borrowing, yeah, absolutely. So we're planning to step down. So we've had some temporary savings, haven't we, as a result of the borrowing. As part of the medium-term financial plan, we're planning to step down those savings. But what we do need to make sure is that where we've got new borrowing emerging, that we're replacing it with a budget for the borrowing costs. And we've been really fortunate in certainly since I've been doing the budget, that we haven't needed to replace that budget because we've been able to borrow internally and benefit from not having to borrow and that kind of improvement. So we need to make sure that we've got sufficient provision. And I think partly because of the split of the debt, we're in an okay position, but it just means there will be a cost pressure going forward for borrowing, which is something we're not used to seeing as a council.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? No, just a quick one for me. Obviously, capital receipts will have an effect, won't it, on the budget, because it's contained in Table 3 about the capital receipts that they've been dwindling down year on year. You'll be selling off the family silver, and clearly no one knows what the capital receipts will be in the future. But if there was a huge increase in the capital receipts, then your borrowing requirement would go down slightly, wouldn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. And we're really prudent in terms of allowing for capital receipts because very often you're expecting to get a sum and it can be eaten into a Section 106 and other kind of commercial factors as well. A lot of the capital receipts we had built up were relating to the sale of kind of historic school sites, and so they were ring-fenced for investment as part of the Sustainable Communities for Learning schemes. But absolutely, where we are projecting capital receipts, that will have a beneficial effect on the borrowing need.
Thank you for that. Okay, there are no other questions. Any comments? No, there's no comments. I suppose that the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor John. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone object or vote against? No, thank you. That's carried. Next item on the agenda is number 6, the report arrangements for joint committee meetings. Victoria?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, this report is to update members on the reporting arrangements for joint committee meetings and to ask for your endorsement of the proposed new process, which will consist of quarterly reports being presented to Cabinet, summarise the meetings of all joint committees and providing links to the minutes, with one exception in relation to the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, Cardiff Capital Region minutes. They'll be reported as they become available. So this is essentially a tidying up of governance and ensuring transparency. As I say, what's proposed is a single quarterly report to Cabinet to give that overview. The committee will recall that they asked for clarity on where minutes of joint committees were being reported in November last year. In March of this year, an initial summary report was provided. And then in July, the committee asked for a further update specifically on where the joint committee minutes would be reported to within the Council's democratic process. So there's just a few points really to raise with members of the committee. And to highlight that some of the current arrangements are for the reporting of minutes are somewhat inconsistent. The Shared Regulatory Services Joint Committee minutes already go to Cabinet. The Central South Consortium Joint Committee, the education reports are prepared annually to scrutiny. Scrutiny start well, with additional reports being provided by request. Cardiff Capital Region previously gone to Cabinet, and now that they're operating through the Corporate Joint Committee structure, they will now be reported as they are available, not on a quarterly basis, to Cabinet. And then the adoption and fostering, so Vale Valley Cardiff reports go to Healthy Living and Social Care, Live Well Scrutiny Committee. I just wanted to flag with the committee that the Central South Consortium, governance arrangements are changing with effect from this month. A report was presented to the executive in March of this year, setting out those proposed changes. So essentially, the joint committee model will be dissolved. And what we'll see is a new inter-authority agreement which will underpin the collaboration going forward. Essentially, certain functions are being separated out. So there'll be a management board with Directors of Education and CSC Director, which will act as the decision-making body, and then we'll still see the annual reports continuing to be reported to Startwell Scrutiny. What I propose in relation to that joint committee arrangement when it comes to an end is that the reporting of the minutes ceases at that point, but not before, because obviously the arrangements for the ending of the of that particular governance framework and entering into the new agreement, we'll need to consider all of the financial implications relating to that change. So going forward, as I've indicated, quarterly report, which Democratic Service colleagues will prepare and present to Cabinet. Overview meetings are held and will include the links to the official minutes within the Cabinet report. So it will apply to all of the joint committees referenced in the report. So that's the South East Wales Corporate Joint Committee, Shared Regulatory Services, which is already reported, the National Joint Committee, which incorporates the Vale Valley Cardiff, so the National Adoption Service and Foster Wales minutes will go, Project Gwyrdd and Coed Church Crematorium Joint Committee, along with the Glamorgan Archives Joint Committee, will also be reported. So that's the detail of the report. Happy to take any questions and then to move to the recommendations.
Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Can I just say thank you and to Gareth? We originally sort of kicked this off. I think we're in a much better place now than we were previously. I think for me, dealing with joint committees on occasions is a challenge for lots of authorities, and I have to say that 2 other authorities I sit on have got the same task at the moment, and they consider it's going to be quite an interesting discussion at some stage. But I just say thank you very much for bringing this, and I think certainly that the proposal you've got for us to consider is a right and proper one, because again that then allows elected representatives to call in should they be concerned about any of the matters that be reported to the Cabinet, whereas I think currently they don't have any opportunity to call some of those things in. So I think it makes it a bit more open and transparent. So if I just say that, thank you very much. Any questions? Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Vicky. And I think this is, I echo the Chair's initial comments. I've got two questions. One is whether or not you're sharing this with other local authorities, because as the Chair said, they all surely are going through this same sort of process. And I think if we can, I think that would be a good practice. And the second thing is about, we talk about transparency for us as councillors, but we don't talk about transparency for the general public. And even with these recommendations, I worry that this still looks opaque is probably the best way of describing these processes. And the reason this worries me is because where there's opaqueness, people can make things up, and they increasingly do in our society, it seems. So I'm just wondering, is there anything else we can do that shows to the general public that they can understand where things are and how they can get hold of this sort of information? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. In relation to the first point, absolutely, we can share that information. We've got across democratic services and monitoring officers, we've got our networks, so we will share that information with our networks. Obviously, lots of councils in Wales, and I know of some of them, they will have their own reporting arrangements in place. But yes, certainly we can share the information. On the second point, I'll give that some consideration. Obviously, the Cabinet minutes are obviously included on the website, so the public have the right to look on the website and see those reports that go to the Cabinet. But I'll certainly give that some consideration, and I'm happy to follow that up with the committee. I appreciate there's not a further report coming imminently. There'll be a further report, I anticipate, Chair, when the Central South Consortium arrangement ceases. But yeah, no, absolutely happy to give that some thought.
Yeah, thank you for that, Vicky. Councillor John.
May I come in on the last point just there? We had a very similar discussion at Startwell recently regarding outside members and transparency when it came to reports and how they engage as part of that. Could we have a discussion with the head of democratic services as part of the reshaping scrutiny agenda regarding outside members of scrutiny committees, which I know is something that they want to review anyway, and how it links in with the call-in procedure? Because I think that having greater transparency about the call-in procedure for councillors as well would be helpful, because it's a little used resource for councillors in scrutiny committees, and trying to link that in with members of the public so that they are able to better ask their councillors in order to further the debate around reports that usually would just be noted through. Could we action that kind of discussion?
Just come back on that, and that I'm happy to pick that up with the head of democratic services. Obviously, the council has recently gone through a significant change to the composition and structure of its scrutiny committees, and I know from being involved in that work that there is a clear desire to involve members of the public in some of the items that are scrutinised. And fortunately, in relation to some, not all of these joint committee arrangements, they are reported to scrutiny. But yeah, that appears to me to be perhaps the most sensible way through raising the profile.
No pressure, Councillor Goodjohn, but I think we should do a recommendation for that from this committee, which will formalise it. If you could think about a recommendation in due course, we'll deal with that. But I think, you know, that's at least it gets formalised then, and someone's going to have to deal with it. So, and hopefully we'll have a report back in due course. Any other questions? Nope. Any comments? No, only comment from me, Vicky. Thank you, as I said again, and the team for bringing this report. Obviously, news to this committee that Central South Consortium is being repurposed, really, or reconstructed in some other shape or form. And I think it's important that we see at the end of the process the impact that that has on the council, and maybe the impact it has on council budgets, because obviously the council pays in a proportion of the Central South Consortium. And if all that is now being disaggregated, with the obviously the implications that the staff may be disaggregated from Central South Consortium back into the constituent authorities, save for those who are actually going to provide the core services. There's a cost to that, etc. So I think we just need to see the whole picture, and I'm sure that once this has all happened and the agreement is in place and all the due diligence is done, that we can then hopefully sign that off and say, it's costing no less or no more. So thank you for that, Vicky. Okay, so we're going to have a new recommendation, recommendation 3, and I think Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, can we add that the Head of Democratic Services alongside the monitoring officer take a review of outside representatives and lay members within council committees to increase participation and review their responsibilities, especially regarding the call-in procedure, to try and increase the participation and representation of members of the public within the council. I hope that's satisfactory for you.
Is that
Yes,
marvellous?
I'm happy with that. And actually, it's on the list of things to do in terms of the participation. So yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so we got some support there from subject to that being seconded. Do I have a second? Oh, thank you, Councillor Hooper. Obviously, that just adds some further weight from this committee in regards to delivering that. So, okay, so the 3 recommendations are that the proposed report and arrangements for joint committees, namely a quarterly report to Cabinet, be agreed. Number 2, that we recommend the proposal to Cabinet for approval. And number 3, what Councillor Goodjohn has just said. Any chance, Mark, you could just read that out very quickly?
Right, to recommendation, Head Democratic Services Monitoring Officer to review external members in the council and their committee, including their representation and the call-in process. I'll finesse that, but
The test of your shorthand, fair play.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Thank you, Vicky, for that. Item 7 then is the corporate risk Q1 update. Tom?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Just by way of a quick introduction to Q1, the report does 3 things. Firstly, gives the response from the strategic leadership team to the recommendations that your committee made, Chair, when you were considering Q4 performance. Appendix B to the report that you've got this evening, and I hope this is a useful format for members that we've been adopting in the last few months. That appendix sets out the 3 comments and areas that the committee wanted some further information and consideration to be given to. The first relating to potential concerns regarding the risks of delivery of major regeneration projects. I think the committee discussed Barry Marina as an example of that. An update report is expected in the autumn now, following the news that ABP had decided to withdraw from the Marina aspect of that programme, which at the time obviously we expressed our regret at. Pleasing that the value for money work that is undertaken as part of that grant fund from UK government has considered that some changes to that scheme mean that it can now still progress, and there's some information within the appendix relating to the changes that are being made, predominantly relating to the acquisition of some land at the mole for development in place of the marina aspect of that project. The committee also discussed the impact of the legal settlement relating to the Aberthorpe power station. Obviously, the council is part of the CJC, and we're contributing to the discussions. We'll continue to keep that under review when we're updating the risk register, and obviously members will be updated as and when those things change. And then finally, some comments regarding the potential overruns and overspends on some projects. And the leadership team have discussed that where often there's no further money, in effect, what we're required to do is look at value engineering the scope or the extent of work. So hopefully those updates provide you with some information relating to what was discussed at the last committee meeting. And then in terms of Q1, Chair, 12 risks remain on the register, 1 scoring very high additional learning needs, 5 scoring high, 4 medium high, and 2 scoring medium. Just to draw committee's attention to some changes that have happened within the quarter, members will note that the housing and homelessness risk, that's risk number 8, has increased during the quarter. That's as a result of new draft homelessness legislation that is being introduced in the Senedd, currently a bill, and that will place additional requirements on local authorities to intervene earlier on in the process to support a wider range of households. We're currently undertaking some work to understand exactly what that would mean and the potential additional costs that would be associated with it. The remaining risks have remained static during this quarter. In terms, though, of the future direction of travel, 5 risks on the register are forecast to increase over time. Those ones relate to information and cybersecurity that the committee have discussed previously, and ditto climate change and the nature emergency. We're also forecasting that social care demand and capacity will continue to increase, as will housing and homelessness. And finally, physical assets is also forecast to increase over time. Some careful consideration was given at SRT last week to all of these risks, and we've also flagged that potentially the workforce risk is likely to reduce over time. We're starting to see members that the actions that we're putting in place to try and mitigate those particular issues are now starting to have some effect. Too early for us to reduce the risk at this stage, but we are forecasting that will happen in the future. So that's an overview in terms of Q1 position. And then just finally, Chair, there was some discussion at the committee last time that this report was considered relating to the scoring process and how the information was presented to members. The team have been very busy, obviously, working on the annual self-assessment over the last couple of months, but they have gone through that process and had a look at the way that that's undertaken, and importantly, how that information is presented to yourselves and obviously to the public more widely. And I think there are some changes to the way that the information could be presented to make that a little bit more easily accessible. What I was going to propose, if members would be happy, is that we conclude that review and then bring a proposal to perhaps an informal meeting of members for your discussion and consideration before we then incorporate any formal recommendations based on your feedback in a future update report regarding corporate risk. So that's just a really quick overview and introduction, but obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom, for that. Are there any questions from members? Matthew.
Thanks, Tom. 2 from me, if you'll indulge me. Looking at the narrative of the report, I wasn't quite sure on the rationale for the workforce and organisational change forecast to decrease. I might be confusing myself because it's quite underpins a lot of the other risks, but I wouldn't mind just your thoughts on that, I guess. And the second one, and it's more a request, I guess, from a training perspective. Financial resources features quite highly across all of them, probably unsurprisingly. I wouldn't mind some visibility on how some of those cross-cutting risks or controls that impact multiple risks are looked at, administered, and taken into account as part of the risk scoring. If that's okay, please.
Tom, do you get that?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matthew. In terms of the first question relating to the rationale for the workforce forecasting to decrease over time, that one is a really cross-cutting risk, as you suggested, and what we've sought within that risk to do is reflect the council-wide work that is underway to support colleagues to make sure that they are able to come to work well, that they are productive, that we're attracting the right kind of talent, that we're developing our staff to make sure that they've got the skills for the future. And what we're starting to see is that generally across the piece, those things are starting to take effect. So, for example, we're seeing absence rates improve on the previous year. We're also seeing through some of the HR metrics that we track on a monthly basis that we're starting to see that some of the capacity gaps that we were experiencing within certain professions now are starting to be alleviated through some of the work that's happening generally in the market, but also some of the specific activity that we're doing, for example, around supporting apprentices, the Quick Start programme, as well as some of our graduate development and trainees. So we're starting to see the general picture being alleviated somewhat. As I say, too early to bring that level of risk down now was the view of the leadership team, but that if we continue to see that positive effect that we expect to see, then that risk would diminish over time. That's not to say that there aren't still some pockets within the organisation where we are having particular issues, and that's why, this links to your second point, there are some risks that are a bit more specific, and the social care demand and capacity one is a good example of that, which has a feature of it in terms of the availability of skilled care staff, both internally and importantly externally, alongside a series of other factors like the affordability of placements and indeed actually even the availability of them in the first place. In terms of the question relating to how do we consider the risk environment holistically, it's a real challenge because obviously there are a series of risks that are all interconnected. Good example, as you raise, is financial resources, but also workforce within that. I'd probably add in digital within that particular example as well, and they all are interconnected. In terms of the process or the way that we go about considering those connections is that the Insight Board review the risk register when it's compiled based on what individual risk owners are saying. The strategy and insight team also do a piece of work to moderate across the piece, and then when it comes to SLT for our consideration, that's very much what we're looking at. So, for example, last week the discussion was heavily on the financial resources and its link to the physical assets risk. We know that we've got an ageing set of assets, whether they're built or highways, for example, and finance is inextricably linked to the condition of those assets. So it's at that stage that we try and make the connections between those things. I hope that helps somewhat.
Yep. Okay. Councillor Hooper.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom. I'm going back to this marina, the words which seem relatively creative. The suggestion seems to be that the new developments are going to supersede the marina. Now, if you were anybody who lived in the marina area, the Making Waves project is and was the marina. So whether you think that's a good idea or not, and some people do, some people don't, it's the central part of this whole bid. So to suggest that this, just by buying the mole, has now changed that and we're back on track, I think is creative to say the least. So I look forward to the report that's coming in the autumn. I also worry that the original plan seems to have, if all the value for money for our the people of Barry was related to the things that were nothing to do with the marina, then what was the point of the marina in the first place? Was it just something that was to try and keep a certain ex-MP in his job? The second point I'd like to make, we talked about the city deal last time and the Aberthaw legal dispute. What would be interesting is some sort of an understanding of when we'll know the answer to this, because this is completely open-ended and I think I'd quite like to know the answer. Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Councillor Hooper. And certainly I'll pass on the comments to colleagues in place to make sure that they reflect those in that update report relating to the marina. So thank you for those comments. And if it's okay with yourself, Chair, I'll undertake to get a bit of an understanding in terms of that timeline for the legal process relating to Aberthaw and make sure that members are provided with an update when I've got that, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think that would be great, Tom, because obviously I understand they're still going through this internal investigation or wherever, and then it'll have to be referred to the board or wherever it is now, and then it'll have to go to their governance and audit committee. But I would certainly hope that we would see it confidentially for our consideration, because obviously we have some locus in the matter, some standing in the matter, because we contribute significantly, and I think it's important that we see that. So thank you for that, Tom. Any other questions? Just one question from me, Tom, in regards to housing and homelessness, the forward direction of travel. Audit Wales have recently issued a national report in regards to temporary accommodation, and I don't think we've seen it yet. And that report contains, I think, 4 recommendations for councils to consider. I think it would be interesting that firstly we see the report in due course, and secondly we see the management response to the 4 recommendations and the timescales which the council come to adhere to. But more importantly, I think it's the point about this new draft piece of legislation that may well come into place, which puts an additional burden on the council. And I may want to keep my powder dry, but what always concerns me about new pieces of legislation which puts additional duties and responsibilities on local authorities, it doesn't come with any money. So the authority will normally have to pick its cost up itself. And I think if you link all that back to temporary accommodation, because again, my understanding is the housing benefit allowance is capped in regards for accommodation, and the local authority then has to pick up whatever is over and above. So, you know, it places an enormous financial burden on the authority if you've got lots of homeless individuals within the county borough. So I think it would be interesting if you can get that report to us, and I hope it was going to come to us, and if it isn't, I'd like to see it anyway. So that we can actually consider that matter, and, you know, maybe we need some financial input as to the actual effect it will have on the council's budget going forward.
Yeah, certainly, Chair. And yes, as you say, that Audit Wales report was recently published, and I'll make sure that in the future regulatory report updates, the item that you've got next on your agenda, actually, that we incorporate that along with the management response. And absolutely, you're right, Chair, to flag the issue in relation to that new legislation. I'm aware that my colleagues in legal services are currently working with the Housing Department to understand what the potential implications of that legislation may be, and it certainly the concerns are, as you say, in relation to affordability. for the organisation, not what the bill is potentially seeking to do. And elected members will receive lots more information in relation to that as we start to develop the budget proposals. Currently, the work that housing colleagues are doing is trying to understand specifically what that legislation could look like and how, as an organisation, we would need to be resourced to respond to it. And they will be putting an indicative cost pressure in for next year's budget in readiness for that work. But the general point in terms of new legislation being introduced or new duties being introduced without additional funding is one that we're well versed in having to try and consider. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that response, Tom, because again, the additional burden it places financially on the council, you're going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul, and some other services will need to be cut or, diminished. So thank you for that. Any questions then? No one else? Any comments, anyone? The only comment I'd make is in regards to the contract overruns and overspends, Tom, and the officer response. Where I picked that up, and I think I made it in committee, was from the delegated powers, which I think the chief executive uses. And I think I was reading through some of the delegated powers, and some of the contracts were actually increasing quite substantially in cost. And as I said, one of them had gone up nearly double. So I think that's where the weather die needs to be kept. Obviously, I'm fully aware once you're in a contract, you're in a very difficult position. But it's just that continuous, not overspend, but, increases in contract price and doubling is quite concerning to me. So I'll just make that comment. It was the delegated powers that I picked that up. Any other comments? Okay, the recommendations, I've gone too far now. I think, no, sorry. The recommendation is that we note SLT's consideration and responses to the Governance and Audit Committee's comments. B, that the Q1 position was considered by the committee, and I think I don't think there are any other. I think the committee refer comments to the cabinet for their consideration. Clearly, people have made comments here, and certainly regards the marina, the overspend, the claim against Cardiff Capital Region, and the issue in regards to delegated powers. But if those comments could just be made to Cabinet for clarification. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Next item is number 9, the Governance and Audit Committee Decision and Action Tracker.
Sorry, Chair. After the Q1 update for corporate risk is also the Q1 25-26 progress against external regulatory recommendations.
Is that on the agenda?
Yeah, agenda 8.
I thought we just did number 8.
What's number? Oh, sorry.
So,
Apologies.
that's all right. That's all right, Mark. Don't worry. Number 9, then we got the Governance and Audit Committee decision tracker. There's nothing else missing, is there?
Bear with me a second, Chair. Yeah, I think we might have missed an item. Tom, I don't know if you want to assist.
Happy to. So I don't know if the running order is right on the chair's papers, but I think we had item number 7 listed as the corporate risk update for Q1.
Yeah.
And then we got item 8, the progress against external regulatory recommendations, before we then move into the series of recommendation tracking, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, my apologies. So we are on item 8. Thank you, Mark. Okay. So it's getting late in the day. Q1 25-26 progress against external regulatory recommendations and end of year position for 24-25. Tom first.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, lots of recommendations being tracked by your committee this evening, so I'll keep this one brief. But this is your regular housekeeping report, members, in relation to the recommendations that are made by the Council's regulators, primarily relating to Audit Wales work, but there's also some details in terms of CIW within care and also within ESTIN for education colleagues. The report does two things. Firstly, it gives you the position at the end of Q1 in the current year. There are 19 actions ongoing within the tracker. Positive progress at this stage of the year has been made with 18 of those 19 having a green status and one which relates to the introduction of some new housing system capability has an amber status. Of those 19 actions, 14 of them relate to local studies or pieces of work that have been undertaken, and the other 5 relate to those that are part of national studies that Audit Wales have undertaken. So during the quarter, you've got an appendix which shows you the latest commentary, and it's proposed that 4 actions relating to the local work on urgent and emergency care, the flow out of hospital, which I know your committee considered recently, have been completed. The report highlights that that response is putting work in progress and will become business as usual. Some of the impact of that will take a little bit of time to see. So that's the housekeeping for Q1. The report also gives members of the committee all of the detail in relation to the end of year position. When we brought the self-assessment report to both the performance committee and to your committee previously, Chair, we had the headline numbers in terms of those things completed and the statuses of the ongoing actions. What we didn't have at that point was all of the commentary available, and to ensure consistency and transparency for the committee, I was keen to make sure that we reported that in full. So there's a second appendix which gives you the same information but relating to the end of year performance. That hasn't changed since the consideration of the self-assessment, but what it does have is a list of the completed actions that we're asking committee to consider and approve the removal of those, so that we're only then tracking work that is ongoing and current. So the report does 2 things, as I say, gives you the end of Q1 position, which is good overall, and then gives you a summary of where we were at in full detail at the end of the year.
Yeah, thank you for that. Tom, on the national regulatory actions, there is a red, which is NR 33.
There is, Chair, and that was considered to be red at the end of 24-25. A review of the activities that have been undertaken, I think, is showing it as being amber in the current quarter. This one relates to the work that is underway to replace the housing system in response to improving some of the customer contact and correspondence. The work that is underway has mitigated some of the effect, and we're starting to see some of the improvements, which is why there's a change in the status between the 2 reporting periods.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. It's green, it is, so my apologies. Questions? Councillor Goodjohn.
Yeah, can I just ask Tom about the PPA recommendations that we had through? At the moment, we have them down as green, and we have target dates as March of 2026. I think it's fair to say from the discussions we've already had at this committee that there's a lot of work yet to be done in order to signal change and change our governance systems as per the PPA reports, which is not a bad thing. I think that's an extremely good thing that we're undertaking this large piece of work, but I do wonder whether you would consider either pushing back the target date. I would be so bold to say that this would probably take at least until the end of this political cycle, perhaps longer, or to, and I wouldn't want to say this, change it from green, but I think that it's a vital piece of work that we're doing a lot of good on. And I would say that perhaps pushing back the target date would be the better option. But I'd wonder whether you consider one of the two options.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. It's a really good question, and what we've sought to do in this report is say that absolutely we've got those recommendations or areas of recommendation from the panel performance assessment by external peers, and we've broken those down then in terms of the actions that we're going to be taking within this current year. At the end of Q1, those things are green and on track, because in effect what we've done is made good progress in the areas that we've said that we're going to be working on currently. And I expect that good progress to continue, because the team's working really hard to deliver that signalling change plan. There's some really good work that's underway in terms of reviewing partnership arrangements across the region. We're also doing lots of developmental work with both council staff and with elected members through the changes to the scrutiny process and some of the reporting and governance stuff that you've been talking about this evening, as well as work in terms of delivering Vale 2030 and the reshaping programme. But that's not to say that that work is all going to be completed by March 2026. I think what we're saying is that the actions that we've identified for ourselves will be undertaken by March 2026. But what I would expect to see and to receive challenge from in the coming months from elected members will be around how we then translate those into actions in the coming year. So I'd expect us in the self-assessment report, when it's brought to members in the summer of next year, to be explaining the progress that we've made, but also importantly the steps that we need to take in future years. But I appreciate how the target dates can look in these things. So in terms of that feedback, if you're comfortable, Councillor Goodjohn and Chair, I'll take that away and make sure that we update the commentary so that it's really clear that it's only the things that we're saying we're going to do. It's not completing all of those actions, because as you say, that's a longer term goal.
John?
Yeah, thanks. That's really good. That's absolutely fine. The one thing I would say is regarding the PPA recommendations, I'd love for you to come back to us and say where you're expecting us to, outside of the annual self-assessment, scrutinise the work being done on those specific issues. Because I feel like being able to do it once per year with the self-assessment might not be good enough for us to respond to different actions being taken by the council. So this is just a piece of work for you to do aside from everything else, I know, but it's just to come away with that question of where are we specifically scrutinising the council's progress in each of these 4 recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and it's a really, really important question, because the progress being scrutinised is an important part of the process. And just to give members some assurance that the council's performance at halfway point of the year, so Q2 will be reported to the Joint Scrutiny Committee again, and that's in the diary, I think, for the last week of November. So as part of that, there'll be an overview in terms of these areas of focus and the recommendations from the PPA. We'll also be updating members via Cabinet and where it's appropriate in terms of reports being referred on to Scrutiny Committee in relation to some of the specific areas. So, for example, the delivery of the reshaping programme will be a report to Cabinet shortly, so elected members will be able to see progress against that. And I know that Vicky is already making arrangements for the review of the scrutiny changes that have been introduced as part of the PPA recommendations, and that will be a standalone report. So in addition to that, the annual self-assessment, the annual governance statement will also pick up aspects of it, the mid-year performance reporting, and then some specific issue-based reports for members, so that you'll be able to see them holistically, but also scrutinise individual progress as well. Hope that helps.
Councillor Goodjohn?
Yeah, just to say that's absolutely fantastic and exactly what I want to hear. It's just on top of that, when we get past these initial changes, where are we over the next 5 years as part of the corporate plan, regularly scrutinising the overall assessment of it. But perhaps right now that doesn't need to be an immediate focus because, as you say, so many individual issues are being scrutinised. That's fantastic to hear.
Are there any other questions? Can I just follow up on what Councillor Goodjohn just said in regards to the PPA and the target date? Clearly, the plan sets out the recommendations in full. So obviously, recommendation 1 has got basically 1 bullet point, recommendation 2 has got 1, and then we got 1, 2, presumably 3, 4 in recommendation 4, and 4 in recommendation 4, sorry, 4 and 3 and 4 and 4. I think the point is very relevant because unless you're going to achieve all that by March 2026, then the target date isn't achievable. And I think, Tom, the point you're quite rightly making is, you're taking these off in bite-sized pieces. So you're going to deal with whatever it is, bullet point 1, then it goes on to bullet point, or whatever it may be. But the end result to deal with all the recommendations will be a date sometime in the future, I would have thought. And isn't that what should actually be reflected in this document? Because currently we've got all those bullet pointed recommendations. If you're only dealing with 1 or 2, then should there not just be a separate plan underpinning all this, which I'm sure there is in the Directorate, as to when those points will be delivered? So the target date, I think what Councillor Goodjohn said, I think I would support to say, look, when we get to March 2026, I think hopefully you would say now that you're not going to achieve all the points within the recommendation. So therefore we're going to come back and therefore put the target date off to when you think you're going to achieve it. Does that make sense?
It makes absolute sense, Chair, and I'm more than happy to go away and have a look at how we best present it. And I think based on the feedback from your staff and Councillor Goodjohn, what we maybe would benefit from doing is taking some of those bullet points and making them more specific into the year. I'm also mindful of not wanting to push the target date out for the general recommendations too far, because otherwise it would, I think, quite rightly open us up for criticism for, well, why is it going to take 4 or 5 years to achieve certain aspects, whereas some of them are longer term things. So with committee's permission, I think what might be useful is if we go away and reflect how we make sure that we're connecting the overarching PPA recommendations with some in-year things in a more specific way. What we'll also see is these things start to dovetail into the areas of future focus as part of that self-assessment report in the future. So I'll go and have a look at them if I can do, Chair, and perhaps come back the next time you see this report with how we're going to translate the longer term into some of those short term things as well.
Yeah, I think that would address it, Tom, completely. I think, I understand, your view. If some directorates say, well, we're going to push it off now till March 27, that we'll deal with them in February 27, which is unachievable. But I think if the long stop date is whatever it is, March 27, but then you split the recommendations down with some other key dates which this committee can be assured that you're going to deliver them by. So, some of them may well be March 26, some of them may be February or whatever throughout the year. I think that would make more sense in regards to how you're delivering these recommendations. So thank you for that. Any other questions? Any comments? No. Okay. The recommendations are that I think we note the progress to date in addressing the existing recommendations made by the external regulator, as outlined in the appended Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker, for periods quarter 1, 25-26 and quarter 4, 24-25. That we recommend the Cabinet that the target date for the PPA assessment be looked at again, and hopefully the recommendations broken down to give some key milestones in regards to delivery of those recommendations, and that we endorse the removal of the completed actions from the SIB Insight Tracker. So I'm prepared to move, please. Thank you, Councillor John. Seconded, Councillor Hooper. Anyone against? No. Thank you. Hopefully I'll get it right this time. Agenda item 9 then is to provide members with the tracking records of decisions made and actions requested by Governance and Audit Committee during the municipal year, May 25 to April 26. Obviously, Gareth's not here. Mark, you taking this?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So the purpose of this report is to provide members of the committee with a tracking record of decisions made and actions requested by the Governance and Audit Committee during the current municipal year, May 2025 to April 2026. In terms of just a brief summary, a record of the outstanding formal decision resolutions made by the Governance and Audit Committee made during the 24-25 municipal year is attached at Appendix A to the report. Appendix B is a record of outstanding decisions and resolutions for the current municipal year and also includes informal actions raised by committee members during the meetings. The committee is recommended to note the contents of Appendix A and Appendix B and to make comments as and when appropriate. It's recommended that the Governance and Audit Committee be kept regularly appraised of all outstanding decisions and or resolutions and actions. That's really a whistle-stop tour from me, Chair, and obviously it's open to yourself and the committee for comment.
Yeah, thank you, Mark, for that. Are there any questions? I think it's a useful piece of kit for us, so thank you very much. Any questions from anyone? Any comments? I'll make a comment. In regards to Appendix A, which is the assessment and knowledge and skills, I think Andrew will, I'm sure, pick this up in his in the annual report in any event. But given there's been some changes on the committee, I'm going to steal his thunder now. But he's going to pick up the training needs in about December this year, or maybe before then, so that we identify what's required. So that will be dealt with shortly. Andrew, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. You have stolen my thunder. This has been in limbo a little bit, but I'll take responsibility for putting a programme together. I'll work with James and with Vicky, and we'll make sure we've got at least a draft training programme moving forward. And when we do the self-assessment in December, we can make sure we top and tail it specifically for what members actually want.
Yeah, thank you for that, Andrew. And obviously we thank colleagues in finance for the training they normally give us in regards to treasury management, a statement of accounts and anything else, which is very difficult in financial terms. So thank you for that. In regards to Appendix B, again, can I suggest that the greens be taken off? Because again, I think people get concerned about these issues. If they've been dealt with, then take them off, and we only need to know what's outstanding. So thank you for that. If there are no other no comments, that the recommendation is that we note the contents of the report. Nigel, sorry, Nigel.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Just on that last comment about them being completed and being taken off, once they get completed, they get reported to us as completed, then taken off. Is that what you're going for? Just to be clear.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So the green ones come off this time, and if obviously some of them are completed next committee, they'll come to us as green, and then we'll take them off.
Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nigel. Thank you for that. Okay, the recommendation then is that we note the contents of the report. Someone prepared to move? Thank you, Councillor John. Councillor Hooper seconded. Anyone against? No, thank you. Item 10 of the agenda then is progress against the internal audit risk-based plan. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Evening, members. So this is one of the regular reports I bring to committee, and this is the first report for 25-26. So hopefully members will be familiar with the format, and it's in line with our global internal audit standards that we report this information into Governance and Audit Committee. You'll note that within the regional service, we've set ourselves a target for completion of the plan for quarter 1, 2, 3 and 4, and quarter 1's target is 10%. The information presented to you this evening is data as at the 31st of July, so it's a bit more up to date than quarter 1. And as members can see from table 1, we're making very good progress in that we've achieved 29% of the plan by sending out final and draft reports within that period. So of the 14 reports that have been issued, we also have some positive opinions. We have 4 substantial opinions, 8 reasonable opinions and 1 limited assurance opinion. And we've set out the description of what those opinions are in paragraph 2.4, Chair, as well, but I'm sure members will be familiar with those already. In terms of the limited assurance opinion, which we've identified during 25-26, that relates to the vehicle fuel management process within the council, and we've bullet pointed the key issues of why we felt that was we could only give it a limited assurance. As you know by now, Chair, we have a process in place for limited assurance opinions where we'll bring that to committee's attention, but then we will go back and do a follow-up audit within 6 to 12 months to make sure that those recommendations have actually been implemented by the operational manager, and we will report back in due course. If we identify that those recommendations have not been implemented appropriately and the risk is still in place, then we will be advising the committee to potentially call in the respective head of service and director to justify why that is the case moving forward. So we're not in that position at the moment. We've built that into our plan for 25-26 is to do a revisit of the fuel process. Members will also note that previously you've called in the head of service in relation to the limited report on tender evaluation and award project and planned team building services. That had a second consecutive limited assurance opinion. We are currently in the process of following that up at the moment, and we'll report back a revised opinion in due course. We have got assurances from the head of service and the director that improvements have been made. Also within the report are any jobs which were outstanding from 24-25, and they're shown at paragraph 2.9, which shows we're steadily progressing those, and 45% have either been issued in draft or final. In terms of the recommendations, we've made 24 recommendations to improve the control environment in the reports we've issued, no high, 6 medium and 18 low, and that'll be picked up in the report that will be presented to you this evening by Joan later this evening. So in terms of appendices, Appendix A shows you the position of everything within the audit plan and the progress. Appendix B shows the progress of any carried forward jobs from 24-25. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Obviously, quarter 1 report. Just one quick question from me. Fuel maintenance or fuel management. Are you able to give the sort of committee assurance there's no ongoing fraud there in regards to the fuel being issued or such like?
That's an interesting question, Chair, really. We can give you assurance that the controls is not as good as they should be in that particular area. We can't say 100% guarantee, hand on heart, that there are other issues. But we do have issues. They reported through the proper processes and the channels, and they're investigated accordingly. That's happened previously. Obviously, that's gone through a process, and the individuals, if they're deemed to be in contravention of the process, will go through a disciplinary process, which then is confidential between the employer and the employee. But rest assured, Chair, we will investigate any allegations that come through to the service.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Councillor Hooper.
Thanks, Andrew. It's just a brief question. The 22 planned audits not yet allocated. When do you expect those to be allocated? I'm really interested in two, the scrutiny one you've got, and also the hybrid meetings, both of which I think we've had conversations in this committee about before. I'm just interested when they'll be allocated. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. We're into Q3 now, so they'll be allocated in due course, and they'll be covered either in Q3 or Q4. But we work in terms of the working our way through the plan. We have discussions with the operational manager in terms of the appropriate timing, but it will be imminent.
Nigel?
Thanks for the report, Andrew. Nice and clear. So thank you for that. A really good understanding of where the plan is, and obviously with those being allocated in Q3 and Q4, that'd be great. Two quick questions just on the fuel management. I just wondered how management took the results of the review. The findings you've put in there seem relatively straightforward in terms of what they should be doing and therefore hopefully how to fix it. So I just wondered how they sort of responded to that review. And then second question, item 48 on your list is the compliance with the Global Internal Audit Standards self-assessment. I just wondered when you were planning to undertake that, please.
Thanks, Nigel. As always, operational managers are generally positive about our reports and are very responsive. In terms of the individual reports, we include a management action plan where we identify the findings of the report, which is evidential based. We include a recommendation, and then we also include a management comment as well, or a management action. So all the recommendations have been agreed by the operational managers with a timescale of implementing a particular control to make the improvements moving forward. When we go up and we do the follow-up review, that'll be a second audit. We'll go in and we'll double check to make sure that those recommendations have in fact been implemented. And none have been disagreed. None of the recommendations have not been agreed, so which is reassuring. In terms of the self-assessment, we try and do that in Q4 as late in the day as we possibly can, so we can capture all the work we've undertaken during that particular financial year, and we will report back that into committee in due course.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Prothero?
Thank you, Chair. Andrew, can I just ask you, with your review of the limited assurance for the tender evaluation and award work that is in progress, in light of the fact that goalposts have changed since the last time you would have done this with the introduction of the Procurement Act 2023, have you been able to change your original criteria so that it fits the new regulations and the new processes that must be followed and the new notices that must be published, because it's a little bit different to when you did this the first time? Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. We've got incorporated Ardell to give some training specifically to the team, which would have incorporated the new processes and the new Procurement Act. Part of what we looked at before was a kind of high volume, low value spend. So those are the things that we'll be following up on to make sure they've got appropriate contracts in place moving forward, either through the proper tendering process or via a framework. But where new legislation has come on board, we've got the appropriate training being provided to the people who are making those decisions.
Are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Matthew.
It's okay. Thanks, Andrew. On vehicle fuel management, doesn't have to be this time, but it'd be useful to understand the numbers. I guess I know what you're saying with many users and things like that, but it would be useful to have some certainty for me to understand what risk you're looking at, whether it's something that's material or not.
Fair point, Chair. We'll take that on board moving forward.
Any other questions? No. Any comments? No. Okay, see the recommendation that we note the content of the report and the progress made against the 25-26 internal audit risk-based plan. Someone prepared to move, please? Thank you. Can I have a seconder? Thank you. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you very much. Item 11, recommendation monitoring. Joan?
Thank you, Chair. Again, this is a regular report that committee are used to seeing. In accordance with the Global Internal Audit Standards, we must report our activity and assess appropriate recommendations are being made and implemented to improve the Council's governance, risk management and internal control. So as you're all aware and Andrew has just touched on, recommendations are made at the conclusion of an audit review if it is felt improvements should be made to mitigate the risk and strengthen the controls. Within the covering report at Table 1 is a reminder of the categorisation that we use, that is high priority, medium priority and low priority recommendations. Appendix A within your report gives you the detail of the high and medium priority recommendation position as at the 31st of July 2025. Within the report at Table 2 is a summary of the recommendation status of 25-26 audits. As I said, this was at the 31st of July 2025, and at that point in time, 6 medium recommendations had been made and none had been implemented. They all had a future target date, which is not unusual. Table 3 within the report is the recommendation status of audits completed prior to this financial year, and I've summarised there over each financial year when the original audit was undertaken between 22-23, 23-24 and 24-25. You will see from that table there were 3 medium priority overdue recommendations, and these are detailed in Appendix B, and it is also noted that these recommendations also relate to limited assurance opinion reports. Table 3 also identifies the number of recommendations made over each financial year that have still have a future implementation date. And as you're aware, until that recommendation is implemented, the risk that we've identified is likely to have remained. So Appendix C provides the details of the 2 high priority and 5 medium priority recommendations that were made in 23-24 audits, just for information to yourselves. And then in addition to that, there is an additional 33 recommendations that were made during 24-25 that still have a future implementation date. Just to assure committee, the auditors do monitor these, and this similar report goes regularly to the senior leadership team, which take the recommendations and particularly outstanding recommendations quite seriously. As I said, this report was done at the 31st of July, and Appendix B was at that date. There has been, though, some progress made, especially in relation to the local authority trading company, and I know Vicky has an update for committee on 2 of those recommendations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joan. Obviously, members may have seen the emails which have been circulated in regards to the local authority trading company. But Vicky, do you want to deal with it?
One. Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, I think Mark might have circulated the update just prior to the meeting this evening, so apologies for that. I had done it, but I literally missed the deadline by about 20 minutes, so I do apologise for that. So essentially, in relation to 1.3, we have taken a number of steps. External advice, specialist tax advice was secured and has been taken forward. So essentially, whilst this area of work hadn't been cleared down in relation to the recommendation updates, which we've been discussing with internal audit colleagues, the work has been taking place on the ground. So once we receive the specialist tax advice, there's been financial oversight, which has been strengthened really through monthly monitoring meetings with the local authority trading company and the council's accountancy team, who who are working closely with the LATC's managing director, the council director, and their accountant, the LATC's accountant. So that work has been undergoing, and essentially it related to how we could refine how free school meals funding was being allocated, so that it was linked more directly to the price of the school meal as opposed to the actual take up of the free school meal. So going to eligibility, so there was greater accuracy within the financial reporting. So those changes have been implemented on a phased basis. And it's been done that way because the financial pressures which are being faced by the LATC, which have been emerging over recent months, particularly in relation to national insurance contributions and other rising costs, have changed to a degree the financial profile of the LATC. So all of that work has been done, and internal audit colleagues have confirmed that there's an assurance in relation to that recommendation. And off the back of that, I think it was 3.2 and the reporting to the Start Well scrutiny meeting. The catering services agreement, apologies, before I go to that, in relation to the catering services agreement in the context of 3.1, what we have done is we've deliberately aligned the updating of the agreement, which hasn't been amended yet, with some of the broader governance reviews that are ongoing and to coincide with the council's budget cycle. So what we wanted to do was avoid sort of piecemeal changes to the agreement, to the catering services agreement, so that we can ensure that going forward we have a robust framework in place. So the scrutiny arrangements, I should add as well, have also been embedded into the shareholder committee terms of reference. Performance reporting is scheduled for this autumn. I think it's going to the intention is to take it to the Start Well Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 10th of November, subject to availability. So in practical terms, that second 3.2 recommendation, which hasn't received assurance yet from the internal audit colleagues, is substantially or just about complete because we will be reporting, and that will obviously align with the final contractual alignment, which we're hoping to achieve.
Thank you for that, Vicky. And I didn't know whether you wanted to deal with the next one, which is the Officers' Code of Conduct issue. It says the current position is that update requested, no policy found on the staff net. And the previous comment was draft policy is out for a review to be finalised week commencing 17th of February 2025. Where are we on that?
My understanding in relation to the fundraising policy, because I know it was discussed with Head of Human Resources and it was agreed and noted, I think, by SLT, I think it was last week or the week before, that it's been done. It's just needing to be uploaded to the staff net and to the external website as well. So it's there. The work was done some time ago, but it's just a case of a very late delay in getting that uploaded. So apologies for that, but yeah, I think that's dealt with.
I think if that could be done sooner rather than later, because as you appreciate, this matter has been outstanding since November 2023. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing to do to upload it, but if it'd been signed off in February, March, then I would have hoped it could have been done instantaneously, but not criticising yourself there.
I'll
but
make
if it
sure
can be
that's
done,
done, yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Goodjohn?
Can I just be of some assistance with that? My understanding is that StaffNet is being changed and improved recently, and there's been some changes to the layout for it, for example, so that may have delayed its upload, I think.
Very kind of you, Councillor Goodjohn. There have been some changes to Members Net in particular, and the addition of the SharePoint. Yeah, but no, I will make sure that that's dealt with. But thank you very much.
Yeah, that was very kind of Councillor Goodjohn. It shouldn't take 7 months though, to get a policy uploaded onto it. But there we are. Any other questions? Any comments? No? Okay, if we go to the recommendations, that we note the content of the report and we note the medium and high term recommendations made by the regional internal audit service. Someone prepared to move, please. Thank Councillor John. Councillor Hooper seconded. Thank you. Anyone against? Nope. Thank you very much. Next one is the draft Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report 24-25. Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is the committee's annual report for 24-25, written on behalf of the Chair, and it's your committee's report. So it gives an update in terms of what's been covered, what areas have been reported into, and how you've dealt with those particular issues. And it's a requirement of good practice to make sure you've got an annual report and demonstrates good governance. It's quite a detailed report which I've helped to shape, but it is on behalf of the Chair and yourselves as a Governance and Audit Committee. So it's a requirement of the Local Government Act and Elections Act and the measure in terms of the requirements and your core functions. And the report demonstrates how you've undertaken those core functions throughout the year in terms of reviewing the draft financial statements, scrutinising the annual governance statement, monitoring the internal audit function, and considering the effectiveness of risk management, the reviews of external audit, the effectiveness of Governance and Audit Committee itself, and ensuring compliance with the Act accordingly, and also incorporating the complaints element as well. So the report sets out what's been covered in terms of core functions, how you as a committee have challenged officers, heads of service and directors and held them account to improve the governance arrangements moving forward, and challenged reports when they've come through to demonstrate good governance. And you've done that across all your core functions. In terms of the self-assessment side of things, information has been incorporated within this report, but the self-assessment itself was undertaken in 24-25 and was actually included in your report for 23-24. So the data is the same. It's just felt that it would be more appropriate to run a self-assessment in December forthcoming, because we've got new members on board, and it'll be more reflective in terms of the input that the new members can make for your 25-26 annual report. And as part of that process, Chair, I'll then take on board the training requirements of members, and we'll pull that together as mentioned earlier today. So in terms of conclusions, the committee has demonstrated that you've met your core functions, that you've held senior management and directors to account for making improvements in the governance arrangements and the control environment. You've challenged officers and sought clarification and progress on reports, and suggested improvements in terms of those governance arrangements and presentation into committee. Some directors and heads of service were also invited into committee to provide further assurances, and that's set out in the appendix, and I'll come to that in a second. But just to say that overall you've met your terms and conditions and achieved your core functions. So Appendix 1 sets out the core functions as determined by the Local Government Measure and the Local Government and Elections Act. Appendix 2 outlines all reports which have been presented into committee throughout 24-25. And Appendix 3 goes into a bit more detail in terms of the challenge that you've given to directors and heads of service and requested further information or even further reporting in terms of some aspects of the reports that have been provided to you. In terms of Appendix 4, then that outlines the feedback from the self-assessment we did in 24-25. But as I said, we'll undertake a new one for in December 2025 coming up. And Appendix 5 just give some bit of background to the lay members, which is yourself, Chair, Nigel, and to Matthew, so we've got an understanding of the experience that you all bring to committee, which enriches the Governance and Audit Committee. That's the conclusion of your annual Governance and Audit Committee report, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Andrew. Questions, Councillor Hooper?
Thanks for putting this report together on our behalf. We appreciate it and guiding it. There's seems to be one thing that I'm not sure we're going to put it in the report, but we have some people who don't engage enough in this committee, and I think that our scrutiny is weaker as a result of that, because more people's voices asking different questions will unearth things that some of us who always ask questions won't be able to do. I think that needs to be improved. Maybe it's something we pick up in the September review, but I think it's a weakness of this committee. It's not just a weakness of this committee; it's a weakness of other scrutiny committees as well. The second point, and I don't think, again, this probably doesn't fit into this review because it's backward looking, but we have a vacancy on this committee. Our last meeting, Councillor Goodjohn and I were probably the only two who were engaged on the committee who were elected members because other members were not there. And again, it reduced the scrutiny and reduced our effectiveness as a group. So I think we should have something that looks forward that says, can we have somebody to come and join us on this most excellent of committees?
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Nigel?
Apologies, Chair. I was still chuckling from the most excellent of committees. Of course, you're absolutely right, Councillor Hooper. Yeah, my comment was similar, really, which is we've reported that we have the full quota of 3 lay members, but that's very outputty rather than outcome. It'd be good to see things like, how many what was the attendance like across the year, so that we can show that not only do we have the lay members and other committee members as well, but we're actually engaging with the committee. The next stage would be, as Councillor Hooper just went to, would be essentially the contribution side as well, which I appreciate is much harder to measure. But I think just as an easy start, actually including things like attendance would talk a bit more to actually people engage with the committee and whose voices are being put forward in terms of the questions being raised and what is being read in the papers. So yeah, just something for consideration for inclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Andrew?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. That can be incorporated. We covered 3 governance and audit committees, and all the reports are slightly different, but we can take that up and share good practice.
I think that Democratic Services have got the attendance register for the committees, and that because you do keep a record, don't you, of the attendances at committees and who the members are and how many attended and how many didn't.
Yes, Chair, sorry if I can just come in quickly. But yes, we do, and I'm just interested really to listening to the comments, and so yeah, we'll have that discussion, I think, with James, head of Dem Services. Yeah, no, interesting.
If that detail can be provided to Andrew soonest, that'd be great. Councillor Goodjohn.
Sorry, don't know if this is possible, but I recall when we were doing the first part of reshaping scrutiny work, Democratic Services did this fantastic piece of work for each of the different scrutiny committees as to how many of the reports were put in just for noting, how many had recommendations, how many were properly engaged with, and how many were monitoring reports. So something like that would be, I think, extremely useful and achieve what Nigel has asked for.
Thank you for that. Any other comments primarily? Matthew?
Not sure if this is a question or comment. Or two.
You carry on.
Did I hear you correctly, Andrew, that you said that the self-assessment was in last year's, but it was also going to be in this year's? And I guess my question or comment is, I'm not sure that that's reasonable to include it in both if you haven't done a new one. It's my personal view. That's number 1. And number 2, which is probably, I'm not sure is very helpful or not, but recommendation 2.2, I'm not sure if I'd be personally comfortable that the committee notes that the report reflects the work of the committee continues to be both valuable and productive. I mean, I probably think it does, but I'm not sure that that's our conclusion to draw. I think it's our conclusion to draw that we've filled our obligations, but not that we are valuable and productive.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we can see, in terms of the second question, we can certainly take that into consideration. In terms of the first question, yeah, you're absolutely right. The stats are the same, but I felt it would be unfair not to include something because we're obliged to talk about the self-assessment. The self-assessment was undertaken during 24-25. As mentioned, it would be more meaningful to do a self-assessment in December, because just the timing of when the report needs to be pulled together. So point taken, and we'll certainly address that moving forward, Chair.
I think we need to praise ourselves now and again, but, you know, that we do consider that what we do provide is valuable and productive, but that's a matter for the council to decide when it receives it. I'm sure there'll be comments appropriate. I think, Vicky, I think one of the key issues which Councillor Hooper's hit upon is the vacancy on this committee. Because my understanding is under legislation, the numbers, if you have 3 members, you can have X number of councillors. So if you're missing one of the councillors, does that then affect the lay members' numbers? So it's important, clearly, that that vacancy is filled to some degree.
Absolutely, and I wasn't aware that it hadn't been for the time that it hasn't been filled. So I've just made a note for my own purposes now to raise that, and certainly we can progress that. We've recently, just as an aside, advertised for an independent member for the Standards Committee, Ethics and Standards Committee. So we're in that space, so we can certainly take that forward. Yeah.
It's the elected member is the vacancy, obviously. So
yeah,
I don't know how it operates within the council on whether it's done on a political balance basis, but it's essential, I think, that not necessarily, again, picking up Councillor Hooper's point, you know, if we could, you know, lots of the members do contribute in different ways, but to have someone just make up the numbers, I don't think it would be right and proper. I think we need someone who understands what we do as a committee. We understand what our roles in terms of reference are, and they can actually add value. So, and as I said, you just need to look at how it affects the lay member numbers if you're missing a councillor.
I'll check I'll send a note back to you and the members, Chair, but I will check the regulations. But my understanding for this committee, that it has to comprise of 6 councillors, elected members, and 3 lay members. But I will look at the regulations which underpin that requirement. So yeah, leave that with me and I'll send a note back.
Thank you for that, Vicky. Okay, any other comments? No? Okay, so the recommendation is that I think we note now the Governance and Audit Committee Annual Report for 24-25, and we recommend it to full council for consideration, subject to the amendment of including the attendance if possible.
Your comments, Chair.
Yeah, yes, okay. Good. So move, thank you. Seconder, thank you. Anyone against? No, thank you very much. Next one is the Forward Work Programme.
Thank you, Chair. The Forward Work Programme, again, is a report you're all familiar with, and this is put forward to assist the committee in ensuring that due consideration is given to all aspects of your core functions. The proposed Forward Work Programme for the next meeting, which is the 13th of October, is at 2.2 within the report, and Appendix A shows you the proposed reports over the up until the end of this the year. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Joan. Can I just ask a quick question before we start? Gemma, statement of accounts. Obviously, are we likely to hit the 13th of October? Because I know there's been some, and I think everyone's been copied in. There's been some discussion around pushing the committee date off till the 20th or the 27th. There's an issue about the 27th, I'm told. I think the issue is once a decision is made, we either take the committee on the 13th of October and just have a special to deal with the statement of accounts and Audit Wales, whatever letter they do as well and such like. So have you got any update on that?
Apologies, Chair. So I think the 13th of October has been really tight for us in terms of delivering an audited statement of accounts. I can't blame Audit Wales. It's probably more on the Vale side in terms of providing information. But we do think that the 27th of October is deliverable. That's reliant on obviously some of the progress around some of the city deal accounts, which I know Audit Wales is prioritising, so that can feed into the 10 authorities signed off accounts. So the 27th of October is the date that we were hoping for from an accounts perspective, and obviously we'll make everything happen to try and hit that date with the ISA 260 from Audit Wales, and obviously that has a knock-on effect then in terms of the potential council date that we'd be working to. But we absolutely think that date is deliverable, but the 13th of October would be really struggling and running the risk that be further changes following Governance and Audit Committee prior to Council.
Suggestion I would make is that we deal with the normal business on the 13th of October and have a special to deal with the statement of accounts, because it's a one item agenda then. We're not going to say very much about it because it'll either be qualified or unqualified, and hopefully they'll be signed off. So I don't know whether that would be a preferred way forward, that we keep the 13th and have a special for the statement of accounts. Not what committee's view is on that, but otherwise we're going to prolong again the discussion.
And just to add that does fall in half term, so I don't know whether that's an issue for members. Audit Wales have said that they would be able to cover it, and obviously from an officer perspective, we can cover it on our side as well.
Okay. Go Super.
I think it's linked to that point as well, is that we always seem to have quite full agendas in this committee. And we spoke about this the last meeting when we took the forward work programme. And it just seems, should we be thinking about having another meeting generally plugged in for this committee? Because it seems like, we've had this has been a light agenda tonight, and it's taken us 2 hours to go through it. It just feels like, we do often have 3.5 hour meetings as well.
Just on that point from Councillor Hooper, perhaps we can do some reshaping work around the committee in reducing our reports to note and improving our different ways of scrutinising agenda items, perhaps doing more things by email before the meeting if there is nothing particularly to discuss, that sort of thing, and also improving the amount of special meetings we have for one item agendas in order to try and improve the amount of scrutiny on one item if we feel that's of particular importance. I don't know how the members feel about that, but that's the way I would prefer, because that's the way that other committees are going, instead of doing more meetings, which sometimes can be counterproductive.
Whilst we note the forward work programme, I think the point you made is very valid. I just get concerned about emails sometimes. There's no openness and transparency in emails floating around prior to a meeting, and I think the public out there sometimes will say, well, what's being discussed behind closed doors, etc. But I do think that again, this isn't the only committee where we're experiencing some time difficulties on agendas. I sit on another one. Some meetings have gone on 4 hours. One meeting went on 4 hours. I've stopped that. Any meeting that goes to 3 hours, that's it. And we've got another, in one of my other councils, got a special meeting to deal with the other agenda items, because 3 hours is a long time. Certainly when you're discussing a very complex issue and a complex item. And I think you've got to do justice to the item you're discussing. We better leave the building. Okay. Could we quickly deal with this? Someone prepared to move that we note it forward? Yeah, second it. Anyone object? No, thank you. There are no other items. I close the meeting. Thank you very much.
Good, Chair.